Man, that's something that you taught me, Rip Kenny, that I still hold so in my front of my mind when I'm mixing now, especially if it's a really distorted sound, a bass, crazy lead.
Your sub-region, like you mentioned, Tesco, you're worried about that. 70 hertz and below, you only have your kick and your sub living there. And you've got your sub sidechain to your kick. So it's really a single file line in the sub-region. You either have the kick or the sub at any given time. And the super highs, it's not the same. It's not a single file line, but you don't want everything up there. You only want like maybe 3 or 4 things tops. And especially for me, like when I'm making like just ridiculously distorted basses, you're cutting at like 10K and above with like a high cut. And sometimes the cue's like steep and sometimes it's you know, a little bit more gradual, but you got to be conscious of the, like, especially when you're distorting stuff, the bleed of harmonics that as you saturate and distort, and it increases the harmonic density of the material up in the super highs. You got to be really conscious of the fact that is going to completely blow out if you have hi-hats and a lead and your snares got a bunch of snap up there. You should think of it a little bit like your sub-region, where you're specifically choosing what few defined elements live up there. You know, and some songs, like the hi-hats are really the thing riding up there. Sometimes I've got a bass that like sounds really nice with having a lot of definition up there, and I'll leave it in there. But a lot of times it's things other than the main element, the lead or the vocal chop or whatever it is that is using that range up there to kind of add the definition.
Yeah, especially like you, man, that's something that you taught me, Rip Kenny, that I still hold so in my front of my mind when I'm mixing now, especially if it's a really distorted sound, a bass, crazy lead. If it's got a ton of distortion at 5K, it doesn't need it at 15K also. It is audible. It is grabbing your ear without all that. And if you carve that top end off of the heavily high mid distorted sound, you get all this room back. First off, that sound is more defined because now that 5K is the part of it that's grabbing you, not everything above 5K, all those octaves. It's just like 5K grabs you. And then the mid range, that's the note itself, grabs you. And then that high end is open for, like you said, the hi-hats, the snap on top of the snare. And if you've got vocals in a section of the song, that is the sound that really needs that sparkle. Like greatly mixed vocals all have that sparkle. That's why when you listen to modern pop or trap records, you'll hear, you know, that's a very vocal-centric genre. And if you listen to all of the musical elements, they're almost always low pass filtered to leave all of that room for the vocal and then of course the ubiquitous trap hats.
Yeah, that's actually, I didn't fully grasp that concept until I started working more in hip hop and pop and realizing that like, oh, this sample I'm gonna make a beat to, on the EQ, it's not showing anything above 10K, but there's subtle 10K that if I roll off, holy shit, this sample suits the vocal that much better. So it's something I always encourage people to check, even if the sound looks rolled off. Even if it ends at like, let's say 9K, very clearly, still put a filter at 9K, put it a bit above, see if it does anything. It may or it may not. And then also pull it back. It might not need 9K. It might only need up to 8K. Or like hard cut it, but also like angle it down so it takes off a bit there. Or add a resonance or whatever, right? Like those are all techniques you can also use in contrast, right? When you think about how analog EQs work, they would do some sort of, I don't want to say unique cue there. It generally wasn't that unique of a shape, but it would give the sound specific harmonics at the cue when the filter cuts off, depending on how harsh that cue was. So you can sort of emulate that by also ramping up or down that node on the EQ if you're using a parametric EQ. If you're using an analog EQ,
It does it for you.
Yeah, it does it for you, but still definitely mess around with it. I'm sure it'll sound even.
Yeah, I'm super glad you said that. That is one way to really help define your sound, is if you roll off everything with a high or low pass filter, and you roll off everything above or below this certain frequency, but right where it starts to roll off, you bump it with that little EQ bell that goes, so it's a flat line and then it goes up and then way down. That little node is going to be the piece. That's really where that sound is going to grab your ear. That piece is going to be extremely well defined, whereas and then that leaves so much space above and below that for something else to be defined. And some sounds, like you were talking about, like 8K, we've talked about 10K and 5K. Some sounds you can roll off way down at like 1,000 hertz, like
500 even.
500. You just get that really wavy, vibey, underwater type sound that's really popular and gives you a ton of feel and texture and the actual musicality of the notes, but leaving tons of space for other more important elements to sit in front of it. And that is just like that. One of my favorite weekly download episodes, one of the best things I ever learned from Bill Gates, was that concept of sitting on top. If something has that 5K or that 10K, it's literally those top frequencies grab your ear and it makes those elements jump to the front of the mix. And if you roll those off intentionally, it can help push that sound back in the mix, so you still get that important vibe of, say, your chord progression without putting that chord progression in competition with your lead for importance in your mix hierarchy.
Well said. Yeah, I think it's worth noting too, like a lot of people I see will use white noise or something like that as a layer. And that is perfect because now you can isolate just that high end and just blend it in as much as you want. And when you have like max 3-4 elements, like Rip Kenny said, now that white noise, it actually is way more correlated to the amount of hype your song has in that section, because it's one of the few elements in 10K. It's not stacking on top of all of the high end from your bass as well. So you could get your bass sitting properly where it needs to, and then just dial in the high end relative to the bulk of the bass.
I like it. What's up, humans? It's Luke, your friendly neighborhood trap Jesus. Thanks so much for watching the podcast, checking out our videos. We truly appreciate you. So, Rip Kenny, Tesco, and myself got you a gift. We made you a free sample pack. It's got basses, it's got FX, it's got crazy percussion and Foley sounds, and it's free. It's all yours. Just click the link in the description below. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe, hit that like button, and share this with your friends. We appreciate you. Peace out and peace among worlds.